The fluorescent lights in the parking garage on the 4th level of the Hargrove Building in downtown Asheville, North Carolina, have a specific flicker. Every third bulb stutters. I know this because I've been counting them for 7 weeks. The way I used to count exit points in buildings, I can't tell you about, in countries I was never officially in. Old habits. The kind that keep you alive when you're 26 and crawling through drainage pipes outside Kandahar, and the kind that make you look paranoid when you're 38 and selling commercial insurance in the Blue Ridge Mountains. My name is June Wilder, and before I became the quietest sales associate at Pinnacle Property and Casualty on the 7th floor of that same Hargrove Building, I spent 9 years as a field operative for a division of the Defense Intelligence Agency that doesn't appear on any organizational chart. My job title, if you could call it that, was regional liaison. What I actually did was embed with local assets in hostile territories, gather intelligence on arms trafficking networks, and occasionally extract people who needed extracting from places where extraction meant the difference between living and not living. I have a scar running 4 inches along my left forearm from a ceramic knife in Mogadishu. I have tinnitus in my right ear from a detonation outside Erbil that was close enough to melt the zipper on my jacket. And I have a certificate from the farm, the CIA's training facility at Camp Peary, in advanced close-quarters combatives, though the certificate itself is classified and lives in a file I'll never see again. I left the agency at 35. Honorable separation. The official reason was personal transition. The real reason was that I woke up one morning in a safe house in Djibouti, looked at the ceiling, and realized I couldn't remember what my mother's kitchen smelled like. Cinnamon and something else. Nutmeg, maybe. I couldn't remember. And when you can't remember the smell of your mother's kitchen, you've been gone too long. I moved back to Asheville because it was the last place that felt like home. My mother had retired there. The mountains were quiet. The air smelled like pine and would smoke in autumn, and nobody asked you questions if you didn't want to answer them. Before I tell you what happened that night in the parking garage, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's continue. I got the job at Pinnacle because I needed structure. Therapist's orders. Dr. Anand Mehta at the VA outpatient clinic on Tunnel Road told me that transition from high-stimulus environments required what he called controlled monotony. A routine. A desk. A commute. Something boring enough to teach my nervous system that not every silence was a threat, and not every stranger was an asset. Commercial insurance was perfect. Mind-numbingly, soul-crushingly perfect. I studied for my property and casualty license in 3 weeks, passed the North Carolina state exam on the first try, and started as a junior associate in March. My desk was in the back corner of the open plan office, next to the supply closet, and under the vent that made a ticking sound every 90 seconds. I didn't mind. I'd slept in worse places. The office had 22 people. Most were fine. Decent, ordinary people selling policies, processing claims, living lives that didn't involve memorizing the structural weak points of every room they entered. A few became something close to friends. Wanda Okafor, the office manager, who kept a jar of butterscotch candies on her desk and called everyone sweetie, regardless of rank. Tom Briscoe, a senior adjuster who'd worked there for 19 years and told the same 3 jokes on a rotating schedule and somehow made them funny every time. And then there was Derek Calloway. Derek was the regional sales director, 44 years old, former lacrosse player at Wake Forest. The kind of man who wore his college ring to work every day and talked about his fraternity like it was a military campaign. He had thick forearms, a jaw that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought subtlety was a weakness, and a management style that could generously be described as compensating. Derek didn't like me. Not from day one. I think it was because I didn't react to him. His entire leadership approach was built on provocation. He pushed, people flinched, and the flinch gave him power. But I didn't flinch. Not because I was brave. Because my flinch reflex had been recalibrated by 9 years of environments where the consequence of flinching was death. Derek Calloway slamming a folder didn't even register on the scale. And that drove him insane. Wilder. What's this? He was standing over my desk on a Wednesday in October, holding my quarterly report like it was a contaminated specimen. My Q3 numbers. Your Q3 numbers are garbage. He threw the report onto my desk. Pages scattered. 2 fell on the floor. The sales floor went quiet. 23 people pretending to look at their screens while listening to every word. You are, without question, the most useless hire this office has ever made. I don't know who approved bringing you in, but whoever it was should be fired right alongside you. A few people laughed. Not many, but enough. The kind of nervous, complicit laughter that people produce when they're grateful the target isn't them. I looked at Derek. I'd once looked at a militia commander in South Sudan who was holding a machete and telling me I'd never leave his compound alive. That man was genuinely dangerous. Derek Calloway was a 44-year-old insurance manager with a receding hairline and a Wake Forest ring. The comparison was almost funny. "Okay," I said. "Okay. That's your response? Okay. I'll revise the numbers." Derek leaned down, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something aggressive and cedar-based, the olfactory equivalent of his personality. "You don't revise. You deliver. And right now, you're delivering nothing. You're a nobody, Wilder. A warm body filling a chair." He walked away. The office slowly returned to its performative busyness. Wanda caught my eye from across the room and gave me a look that said I'm sorry without saying a word. Tom Briscoe pretended to sneeze to cover the fact that he was shaking his head in disgust. I picked up the pages from the floor, straightened them, put them back in the folder, and went back to work. Have you ever been publicly humiliated by someone who had absolutely no idea what you were capable of? Someone who mistook your silence for weakness because they'd never been in a room where silence was the only thing keeping people alive. Here's my flaw, and I need to be honest about it. I didn't fight back. Not because I was taking the high road. Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I let even a fraction of the old version of me surface in a civilian environment, I wouldn't know how to control it. The therapist called it hypervigilance management. I called it keeping the lid on. But some nights, the lid doesn't stay on by choice. Some nights, it gets knocked off by circumstances. That same Wednesday, 11:07 p.m., I'd gone back to the office to retrieve a USB drive I'd left in my desk. It had my VA appointment records on it, which I didn't want floating around an insurance office. The building was mostly empty. Security guard at the lobby desk, half asleep, watching something on his phone. I badged in, took the elevator to 7, grabbed the drive, and took the elevator back down to the parking garage on level 4 where my truck, a 2009 Toyota Tacoma with 187,000 miles and a dent in the tailgate from a deer in Weaverville, was parked. The garage was quiet. The third bulb was flickering. I could hear the hum of the ventilation system and, faintly, traffic on Patton Avenue 4 stories below. And then I heard something else. A voice. Male. Aggressive. Coming from the far corner of the garage, near the stairwell exit. "Give me the keys." "Now." I said now. A second voice. Higher-pitched, panicked. Okay, just please don't." I recognized the second voice. It was Derek Calloway. I stopped walking. My keys were in my right hand. My truck was 15 feet away. Every rational part of my brain, the part that Dr. Mehta had spent 18 months training to choose de-escalation, to choose safety, to choose leaving, told me to get in the truck and drive away. Call 911 from the road. Let the professionals handle it. But there was another part. The part that had spent 9 years in rooms where calling 911 wasn't an option. The part that had been trained to assess, engage, and resolve. The part that hadn't been turned off so much as turned down. I set my keys on the hood of my truck, quietly, and I moved toward the voices. 3 men. Ski masks. Dark clothing. One was holding Derek against the concrete wall by his jacket collar. A second was going through his pockets. The third was standing lookout, facing the opposite direction, toward the elevator, not toward me. Derek's face was white. His lip was bleeding. His college ring, the one he wore every day, had already been pulled from his finger and was in the second man's pocket. I assessed the scene the way I'd been trained to. 3 hostiles. No visible firearms. The one holding Derek had a knife, a folding blade, maybe 4 inches, held loosely, which told me he wasn't trained with it. The second was unarmed. The lookout had something in his waistband. Couldn't tell what. The lighting was poor but functional. Concrete floor, concrete pillars, 2 vehicles in the immediate area providing partial cover. The lookout saw me first. He turned, startled, and said, "Hey, get out of here. Walk away." I didn't walk away. I said walk away. He stepped toward me. His hand moved toward his waistband. What happened next took 11 seconds. I know, because the parking garage security camera, which I didn't know was functional until the police reviewed the footage later, time-stamped the entire sequence. Second 1. I closed the distance to the lookout before his hand reached his waistband. In close-quarters training, we called this collapsing the reactionary gap. You move faster than the other person's decision loop. By the time they decide what to do, you're already there. Seconds 2 through 4. I controlled his weapon hand. It was a taser, not a firearm. Redirected it away from my body. Applied a joint lock to his wrist that I'd practiced roughly 10,000 times at the farm, and took him to the ground. The taser clattered across the concrete. Seconds 5 through 7. The second man released Derek and charged me. No technique, just momentum. I sidestepped, used his own forward motion to off-balance him, and applied a rear chokehold. Not a submission, just enough pressure to put him on his knees. He went down gasping. Seconds 8 through 11. The man with the knife turned toward me. He hesitated. That hesitation was everything. In the field, we were taught that a person who hesitates with a weapon doesn't want to use it. I stepped inside the arc of the blade, controlled his wrist, stripped the knife, and put him face down on the concrete with his arm locked behind his back. 11 seconds. 3 men on the ground. 1 knife, 1 taser, and 0 shots fired. Derek Calloway was still pressed against the wall. He hadn't moved. His mouth was open. His bleeding lip trembled slightly. He was staring at me the way people stare at things they can't categorize. Not with fear, not with gratitude, but with the pure bewilderment of someone whose entire understanding of another person has just been demolished. "Call 911, I said calmly. "Tell them 3 suspects detained. Level 4 parking garage, Hargrove Building. No firearms discharged. 1 edged weapon secured." Derek fumbled for his phone with shaking hands. I kept the knife man pinned with 1 knee and maintained visual contact with the other 2. The lookout was groaning, holding his wrist. The second man was still on his knees, breathing hard. None of them moved to get up. The police arrived in 6 minutes. 2 Asheville PD cruisers and a Buncombe County Sheriff's unit. They found exactly what I'd described. 3 suspects on the ground, 1 knife, 1 taser, 1 very confused regional sales director, and a 38-year-old woman in khakis and a fleece jacket standing perfectly still with her hands visible at her sides, because I knew exactly how to position myself when law enforcement arrived. The officers cuffed the 3 men. One of them, a sergeant named Trujillo, looked at the security footage on his body cam playback, and then looked at me. "Ma'am, who are you?" "June Wilder. I work upstairs." "You work in insurance?" "I do now." Sergeant Trujillo studied me for a moment. He'd been in the army. I could tell from the way he stood, the way he held his flashlight like a secondary tool, the way his eyes assessed me not as a civilian, but as a potential professional. He nodded once. The kind of nod that says I know what you are without needing you to explain it. "Thank you for your service," he said quietly. "Likewise," I replied. Derek was sitting on the bumper of someone's sedan, holding a gauze pad to his lip. An EMT was checking his pupils. When I walked past, he looked up at me. "Wilder." I stopped. "What? Who are you?" I looked at him. This man who had called me a nobody 12 hours earlier, who had thrown my report on the floor, who had leaned into my space and told me I was a warm body filling a chair. "I'm the nobody from the back corner of your office," I said. "The one who can't close a quarterly report to save her life." Then I picked up my keys from the hood of my truck and drove home. The 3 men were identified as part of a crew that had been targeting professionals in downtown parking garages for 2 months. For prior robberies, escalating in violence. The Asheville Citizen-Times ran a small article about the arrest. My name wasn't in it. I asked the police to keep it out, and Sergeant Trujillo made sure they did. Some things are better left unwritten. Derek came to work the next day with a bruised face and a quiet voice. He didn't mention what happened in the garage. Neither did I. But something had changed. He stopped hovering over my desk. He stopped throwing reports. He stopped calling me names. One Thursday, about 3 weeks later, he walked past my desk and set down a coffee. Not with a speech. Not with an apology. Just a coffee. Black, 2 sugars. Which was how I took it. Which meant he'd paid attention at some point, even though he'd never shown it. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. Kept walking. Wanda saw the whole thing from her desk. She caught my eye and raised an eyebrow. I shrugged. She smiled and went back to her butterscotch candies. Tom Briscoe, who had somehow heard the entire story through the office grapevine despite no one officially talking about it, stopped by my desk later that afternoon. "So," he said casually. "Insurance, huh?" "Insurance," I confirmed. "Must be a real change of pace for you." "That's the idea." He nodded. Then he told me the same joke he'd told on Tuesday. And somehow, like always, it was funny. I'm still at Pinnacle. Still in the back corner. Still under the ticking vent. My Q4 numbers were better. Not great, but better. Dr. Mehta says the fact that I didn't walk away from the garage situation isn't a setback. It's evidence that the training is integrated, not erased, and that the goal was never to delete who I was, but to choose when to let that person surface. I think about that a lot. The choosing. Because for 9 years, I didn't choose. The mission chose. The asset chose. The threat chose. Every action was a reaction to someone else's decision. But that night in the garage, for the first time, I chose. I chose to step forward. I chose to use what I knew. And I chose to walk away afterward without needing anyone to know. That's the part they don't tell you about leaving the field. The hardest mission isn't the one where someone's shooting at you. It's the one where nobody knows your name, and your biggest enemy is a man with a college ring who thinks silence means weakness, and the most dangerous thing you do all day is sell a commercial liability policy to a dentist in Hendersonville. That's the hard mission, and I'm still on it. Some people earn respect through titles. Some earn it through money. And some earn it in 11 seconds on a concrete floor, under a flickering light, in a parking garage that nobody remembers, for a man who called them a nobody that same morning. You don't have to announce who you are. Eventually, the moment announces it for you. Have you ever had someone completely misjudge you? What happened when they finally found out the truth? Tell me in the comments. And if this story reminded you that silence isn't weakness, like and subscribe.